Hello, Spinballs and Spring Pads. My name is TB Skyn, and this is the first episode of Sonic Mania Adventures, a series of animated shorts that Sega are putting out in order to promote Sonic Mania. It's been done by a number, but not all, I believe, of the same people who did the animated intro for the game. And if you remember, back when that animated intro was first revealed, I did a long video breaking down all of the animation and talking about all of the aesthetic touches that I really like about this new classic approach to Sonic. So we're going to be doing that again. Settle in for the long haul, kids, because I have got a lot of things to say. First of all, the thing I like perhaps the most about this animated short is that it is entirely wordless. There's not a line of dialogue, there's really no text to speak of. Everything about the characters, their emotions, their relationships, how they behave, how they see the world, how they interact with things is communicated entirely through their physical motion, their expression, their acting. And this panders directly to my sensibilities because it's just my favorite kind of animation. I love it so deeply. It's why my favorite Pixar film of all time is WALL-E, because the main characters of that movie never say a single word beyond Pokemon-like repetitions of their own names. The same thing is very much true for these shorts. And I don't want to bag on modern Sonic too much, but I am a classic Sonic fan, and you know, I like the Genesis games. I did not so much like the 3D games, just so you know my biases as we're going into this. There's nothing wrong with liking the 3D games, by the way. Don't ever let some salty classic Sonic fan tell you that there is. But for me, this encapsulates that feeling of Sonic that I had when I played the original games on the Sega Master System and Genesis back in the day. This is the kind of characterization, these are the kinds of things that I would imagine Sonic doing. Even, you know, when his limited sprite set didn't quite let him communicate it. For me, this captures the feeling of Sonic almost perfectly. And good lord, I have so much to say, so let's get into it. And let's start right at the beginning with Sonic and his movement. Again, because it's wordless, movement is really all we have to go by. So who the character is, how they feel about the world, how they react to things in general has to be expressed immediately. And here Sonic's character design, like this type of character design lends itself very well because Sonic, as we find out immediately, is curious. You can see it here, like things aren't quite how he expects them to be, so he looks around. His big ass eyes, like these huge eyes, lend themselves very well to that kind of inquisitive expressiveness. And the first thing he does is investigate his surroundings, and then Eggman shows up. And by the way, there's a mix of 2D and 3D going on in this animated short. Eggman, as he flies overhead here in his little Eggmobile, whatever the heck it's called, is 3D. The capsule that he's dragging behind him is 3D. And the same thing goes for the trap that he springs on Sonic here. This one here is also a 3D model, animated and inserted alongside the rest of it. And exactly why they made that choice, I can't comment on, but sometimes it can be a big time saver to animate a complex object like this as a 3D model, because you can build a 3D model and then you can do whatever the hell you want with it. Whereas if you had to hand animate all these details, all this texture, all this stuff, that can take up quite a lot of time, and I imagine that these shorts are animated on a relatively limited budget. So there's a mix of 2D and 3D going on here with the characters in 2D and with some of the objects out in the world, like the flying car, like the capsule, being 3D animated, which is I like looking at that stuff and thinking about why would the animators make that choice and trying to figure out like what kind of considerations go into that. So, Sonic's movement is about to begin in earnest here, and we're getting something communicated about his character already. He sees a helpless animal being taken away by a mad scientist, and his reaction is this. This is his reaction. This kind of confident, like, I'm just gonna clear my nose, and whoom. So, we're already getting information about him that he's someone who wants to help out people in trouble, but who's also perhaps a little cocky and overconfident because he doesn't have any worries about this. He's like, oh, I can fix this. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog. So we're already getting some information about his character that's gonna be relevant later, by the way. And now take a look at what he's about to do, he's about to spin up his legs and dash off towards the camera, towards us as the audience, in order to chase after Eggman. That's what he's about to do. So let's see how he goes about doing that. That's an interesting way to do it, because instead of just spinning up his legs and getting going, the very first thing he does is jump. And he jumps to get into his spin, and as he's moving from this position right here, in order to get over here, like he moves out at camera right around this position right here, if you can see my mouse circling. But how does he get there? First he goes to the left, and then he goes to the right. And this plays into some of my central thesis about the animation of Sonic in these shorts, and indeed in the intro to the game. If you go back and watch my video on that, what you'll see at some point is that I start commenting on how Sonic moves like a ball. He moves like a springy, bouncy ball, or a spring, indeed. And you can see that come to expression right here, because the first thing he does is jump. He bounces himself into the spin-up, and then as he's about to take off, again, there's this two-stage motion. Rather than just straightforwardly going directly where he's supposed to go, he does this whing, and then whing. So there's this constant wind-up and bounce, and we're going to see more of that later. But first, let's take a look at this jump in particular, because there's some interesting stuff going on. And by the way, I'm going forward and backwards frame by frame by using the comma key and the period key on my keyboard. That advances and, goes back one frame at a time on a YouTube video when it's paused. So, and I recommend you guys go and do this yourself, because the smear frames in this thing are lovely. They're fantastic. Look at that. And there's a whole lot of them. You can see here how Sonic gets completely smeared out for a lot of his motions. And here's one of my favorites right there. I love smear frames so much. They're so fun. And the function of a smear frame in a piece of animation is to smooth the behavior of the character without just throwing more frames at the problem. Because what the animator wants from this is a relatively smooth motion of Sonic from the right to the left, and then off screen there to the right. But in order to get truly smooth motion, as any gamer will tell you, you might want to go with 60 frames per second. That's when you get stuff that looks really, really smooth and naturalistic. You kind of can't do that in an animation. We don't have 60 frames per second here, because that would be prohibitively cost expensive to try and do. So smear frames are a way to kind of fill in the gap where we can't do 4, 5, or 6 frames to have Sonic cover all this distance, so we're going to smear some of the frames out. And what that does is it helps you sell motion that looks really, really smooth, even if you don't have that many frames to work with. And it's also just an artifact of how the human eye perceives motion. For instance, if you wave a hand in front of you really quickly, what you'll see is that your hand almost looks like it's been lightly smeared out across your vision. I'm shaking a hand in front of my face right now for some reason. I don't have a camera on me. I don't know why I'm doing that, just as part of trying to explain. And that's kind of what they're imitating by using a smear frame. And by the way, his legs are also being smeared in a really clever way, by the way. Sonic jumps up, and now he's here. This is sort of the top of his jump, right here. And look what happens as he descends onto the ground, because the first thing he does when he hits the ground is he spins up his legs in that figure 8 so he can dash off. But look how he gets there. He lands with his left foot, but his right foot is still in the air, and you can see it's kind of being smeared out. It becomes an animation smear, and then that smear transitions into starting that red smear that becomes the figure of 8. And I'm going to say words like smear and bounce are going to come up like a hell of a lot over the course of this video, so just get used to it. Starts to smear into, and it absorbs kind of his other foot here, and that kind of starts, you can see this curvature motion right here, this motion right here, starts up and becomes that first curling that eventually turns into this ribbon, which becomes his rapidly speeding legs. And that's just such a clever way to do it. Also notice that he's kind of swinging his arms around when he's doing it. Almost like he's winding up a little bit, which I just think it's a really nice way to communicate that motion. And the smear frames for his spinning legs here are also just gorgeous. Like, look at how how much speed is communicated. Even when you're looking at it when it's a still frame, you still get that sense of, wow, something's blurring past really fast here, and it's just lovely to look at. And there's a whole lot of these smear frames as well. Like they cycle through a lot of them in order to really sell the speed as he goes into the best smear frame in the whole thing. And you can see he zooms to the left, and then he kind of pauses here. There's like 4 or 5, 6 frames of him being on the left side of the screen, and then when he decides to speed off to the right, it's very quick. 2 frames, that's pretty much what we get of animation of him speeding off to the right. And that's really what sells this. Something else that's important about Sonic, that again, with his nature of being like a spring, is, you know how he charges up the spin dash and then he's like, pow, and then he zooms off. Like he stores up all this energy, like you're compressing a spring, and then you let go, and then he, boom, then he zooms off like that. And that's really being sold here again by, like, first of all, the wind up of the legs, leading to a quick motion to the left, and then wait a second, and then zoom. And that's really, for me, that's what really sells the motion. Also, that clever little camera wobble. Notice how the camera wobbles a little bit as he speeds past, which kind of sells the idea that he's moving really fast and leaving a shockwave. Again, talking about Sonic as a ball, like a bouncy ball or a spring, look how he enters this frame. As a bouncy little ball, which lands on the ground, unfolds, and then he stays. You can see he kind of hovers in the air for a little bit, and then smear frame. And there's something so clever about the ways in which they unfold Sonic, because you can see here his legs kind of unfold. He's completely smeared, and then he turns into something that's recognizable as him. And then when he turns back into a ball, the first thing that happens, you can see his legs and his hands, all the detail vanishes, and they just become these color smears that follow him around. And that's how they make the transition from Sonic to curled up blue ball look believable. And you can see it again here. Before all the detail, before all the you know, detail, that's the word I was looking for, becomes added to him. First, there are these little formless blobs that then get the detail added to them, and then as he's about to speed back into, you know, quick motion, again, there's this blurring of where all the detail kind of vanishes, and you can see it here again as he's speeding past. And it's also just a thing of saving time, in the sense that the animator doesn't want to have to draw full detail on every single frame of a quick motion, but it also helps sell the speed. And again, let's take a look at the nature of the motion he has in here, because he comes in, bounce, boing, boing. So there's this constant, again, with the bouncing ball thing that I'm gonna repeat over and over again, where he never takes the straight path, right? He never goes directly from here and then just runs to the tree and climbs up. He takes this circular winding motion, almost like he's going through a half pipe, right? Zoing, zoing. I also love the way they animated him just going up the tree here, because it's so quick and you barely notice it, but look how he kind of snakes around it. Look how weird it looks too. And this is, again, because it happens so quickly, the animator doesn't really need to be super accurate with it. He just needs to communicate the sense of Sonic snaking his way around. And again, for me, the interesting thing of animation is looking through and looking at where do they cut the corners? Because that's really a lot of the art of animation, is finding out where to cut the corners. Where does it matter if you put in a lot of effort? And where can you just kind of go, smear, smear, blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't really matter, because all you're really looking to do is sell the motion, like the sensation of the motion, rather than the literal, just drawing the literal motion. And again here, before he becomes a ball, there's this moment where his limbs are smeared out so that they can vanish without it looking weird. Because, like, once he's the blue ball, he doesn't have any limbs at all. He's just a blue smear that streaks across the sky. So in order to sell the rotation, in order to tell us that he's spinning when he's doing this, you have these little, like, the shoe is left here in order to tell us that this thing has moved in a curving motion from here to there, and he's spinning now. And here again, you can see there's a lot of bounce to the way he lands, right? he compresses down and then he unfolds like that. And if you look at there's a moment in the animated intro to the video game where Knuckles does a landing like this. And they've done a great job of differentiating the characters from motion, but Knuckles lands and he just kind of, he lands like a rock. Like he doesn't deform, he doesn't compress, he doesn't really change that much physically. He just kind of lands and then stands up. But Sonic, you can see that he squishes, he deforms, he really acts like rubber, essentially. Now remember 5 million years ago when I was talking about how Sonic's characters communicated to be a little bit cocky? That comes into play here. It has already been set up earlier that Sonic is a little bit of a like, I can fix this. I can do this. I'm overconfident. So here, as the audience, here's the thing he was chasing, completely unguarded. There's this big empty space between Sonic and there. We know the moment we see this frame that, oh yeah, obviously it's a trap. And Sonic kind of seems like he sort of realizes that something is up here. He's like, But look at his decision then. It was like, but I'm not worried. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog. Nothing bad could possibly happen. And then he runs into spikes. And that whole confident demeanor, like that overconfidence that he was so full of, kind of, vanishes as he goes up. Yes. I love the ways, by the Sonic, the character design is really, it's just a ball with another ball on top of it, and the ball has a few spikes going out of it, but it's a ball with a couple of strings of a couple of noodles attached to it, and at the end of those noodles are hands and feet. And that enables them to do poses like this one, which is so expressive. Like, it's classic Disney levels of expressive. And again, I love the way that he's just allowed to kind of hang in the air. He's just kind of hovering there. Which, again, is part of that constant tension and release that comes from his spring ball nature. Is he spends some time hovering in the air, then he comes down, and he gets a little moment, and then he has to jump and spin, and then he has to dodge away from it. And again, here you can see how they transition him from being a physical Sonic into being a ball with smearing. And you can see his feet here emerge before he lands, and you can see his legs change their length all the time. Like here they have one length, now they have another, now they have another. Like here they get really long. And it allows him to kind of pull his legs behind him like he really has rubber for legs. And again, helps sell that springiness of his motion. There's also something clever that happens in this little sequence. The first 3 spikes, he dodges, and you can see there's a lot of animation that's been spent on animating him dodging them, but the next many spikes, like 1, 2, 3, the next 4 spikes, no animation whatsoever. It's just this image being copy-pasted and rotated over and over again for each new set of spikes. So there's no animation going on here, and that again is we cut the corner. Because this, that, and this thing has already told us that what's happening here is that Sonic is stepping on spikes and dodging them at the last second. That's what's happening in this scene. That's what he's been doing. But instead of spending 40, 50 seconds of just animating him dodging a spike and 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 dodging a spike, we just do this. Because the audience gets it. We trust that the audience knows that that's what's happening, and we make a little joke out of it, that he's overconfident and now he's being punished for his overconfidence. And that little bit of hubris is really important to the characterization of Sonic here, because watch how he lands when we enter this shot. First of all, watch how he enters the frame. As a bouncing ball. There he is. He's a bouncing ball, comes up, and boom. And watch how he lands now. Whee! Right? He doesn't just land, he doesn't just touch down on the thing. Like, if you jump and you land on something, generally speaking, you don't do this immediately. Like, you don't bounce up like that, but Sonic does. And then this little moment of brilliance. Those little sweat drops and that kind of strained smile where he's kind of pretending like, meant to do that, totally on purpose, I wasn't in trouble at all, everything's super cool. And then he kind of regains his confidence, and he gets to have that confidence for a few moments, and then this happens. And again, in exactly the same way, it's like, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog. Nothing bad could possibly happen to me. No! And these lovely little, like, he's flapping his wings kind of like a startled bird, which is just adorable. It's just hilarious. And again, you can see he has landed here. And again, look how he stands up from here. He doesn't just stand up. Like, he doesn't just extend his legs and stand up in a standing pose. He compresses down and then he unfolds up. Everything about him is bouncy all the time. I also love the timing, by the way, on this trap. Take a look at the timing on it, right? We're going to start from here. You saw that, right? What happens is we get an initial motion like this, which is very fast. And then we get just a little moment, like where Sonic, nothing really happens to him. So the trap extends, we get a moment of pause, and then he gets pulled up. And just as a comedic timing, this allows us as the audience to take in Sonic's expression, like to understand how he's feeling about the situation. But it also kind of, it makes it a little funnier than if it had just happened like in one smooth motion. To have that little moment of Sonic going like, oh shit, boom, and then getting pulled up. That's a little funnier to me. And again, that's just a nice choice. And now we get to see a contrast. Like I've been talking for ages and ages and ages about only Sonic and how he emotes and how he moves. So now take a look at the contrast between Sonic, who's always bouncing, who's always up in the air, who's always wing, 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 always bouncing. Take a look at how Eggman moves. Eggman almost always has 1 foot on the ground, at least 1 foot on the ground. Even when he's doing this motion right here. See? Even when he's actually jumping around, there's almost always 1 foot either on or just very near the ground. He never really lifts off. He never really flies up into the air. And this is a way to, first of all, it communicates his weight. Eggman is a big round thing, so he has a lot more weight to him. He's like a big sack of flour or a big medicine ball, essentially. And that contrasts him with Sonic. Sonic is also very rounded, but Sonic bounces high. He always, boom, boing, boing. He's always flying high into the air when he bounces. He's always leaving the ground. He's always, you know, taking off. Eggman doesn't. You can see here when he's kind of celebrating. When Sonic celebrated after here, he lands like this. He does the same pose that Eggman does later, right? That arms in the air, yay, I have one pose. But he does it by jumping into it like this. And Eggman does it just essentially by whoop, like that. He never leaves the ground. He never takes off. And that's, from a visual standpoint, that's a brilliant way to contrast them. Like, it shows us in a visual sense that these two are opposites, or not quite opposites, but that they are contrasts to each other, that their personalities are different, that their physical natures are different. And again, it seems, I know when you say it, it just seems like banal. Like, it seems like it's not that big of a deal. It seems like it's not that impressive. But for an animator, this is really hard. Like, learning to animate things moving in different styles with different weights and completely different physical expressions, that is tough work. Like, that's, you have to have a model in your head of how things move that is honestly very complete. So for me, this is just really impressive to look at, even if it looks kind of mundane. But something else to notice is that even as Eggman and Sonic are, like, their physicalities are very different, there is one crucial similarity between them, is that they're both made of rubber. And you can see this in the way that Eggman bounces around, right? Even though he never leaves the ground, even though he never gets airborne, even though he's not kind of light like Sonic is, he's still very rubbery. He still gets smeared. He still kind of boing, boing, boing. He still makes those motions like he is a big rubber ball. So there's a similarity between them. And that similarity is kind of important. Because see what's going to happen as Eggman falls for Sonic's trap here, and Sonic gets free. Take a look at what Sonic does now. Sonic has just done the exact thing to Eggman that Eggman did to him. What Sonic does is he lands, he's here, he looks at Eggman, he looks at the timer, and then he goes, well, peace out, taunting him as he leaves. Which, by the way, what does Eggman do when he thinks he's in control, when he thinks he's won? He looks at the timer, he looks at Sonic, he goes, mahaha, peace out, and tries to leave. So they have done physically the exact same actions to each other, and this helps establish their dynamic. They have a character dynamic. They have a rapport with each other. They know each other, and they have this little rivalry going on where they kind of try to one-up each other, and they like to taunt each other. That's important for their relationship, is that they like to taunt each other. They like to take the piss out of each other. Because they know each other, because there's a relationship, you get the sense that these two guys are old rivals, that they're old, well, enemies, essentially, that there has been a long relationship between them. And it's all being communicated without a single... No one ever says, oh yes, my old enemy, Dr. Eggman. Eggman never says, my nemesis, Sonic the Hedgehog. Never. But you still get the sense that these two guys know each other, that they've done this many times before, and that it kind of always turns out this way, where Eggman is gets tricked and left in the dust by Sonic, who's kind of smarter and clever. By the way, the only time Eggman ever gets really up into the air, when he sees a Chaos Emerald. But even then, like, he bounces up into the air, but notice how he lands. Right? You see that, right? If it's Sonic who lands, what he's going to do is he's going to compress, and then he's going to bounce up again, and then he's going to land. Eggman just kind of floats, doesn't bounce, he's not a spring. He's more of a walking egg, essentially. Like, he moves more like he is an egg. And again, I love the awkwardness with which Eggman tries to snatch the Chaos Emerald. Look at that. Whoop. Look at it. It's so good. Boink, boink. And I love the slap fight. Like they're school children fighting in the schoolyard. Not really mortal enemies who want each other dead, but they're just kids fighting over a Pokemon card at recess. And Sonic wins by giving him a kick on the fingers. It's just a lovely little character acting moment. And again, talking about the relationship between the two, Sonic spins himself out of the trap, gets caught by the birds he just saved, and then he does this little side eye, like, yeah, see what I can do, because he wants to see the expression on Eggman's face as he gets free, because there's a rapport, there's a relationship between them, and these little moments just sell it so very well. I also just love that they chose to do that really quick boink, boink, like no frames in between, just. And then Eggman, here's again a moment of characterization through motion. Eggman does his little puppy eyes thing, and take a look at Sonic's reaction. It's like, ugh, fine. And this is the crucial difference between them, right? This is where we establish that Sonic, even though they do this, Sonic does exactly the same thing to Eggman that Eggman did to him, he's not just vindictive. He's not just a Bugs Bunny type kind of cruel trickster. He is a nice guy. He's like, fine, I'll cut him down. Like, it's just like, because it's that moment where his conscience is just like, I guess I can't just let him die. And here again, in terms of the plotting, something very clever happens. First of all, you get Eggman's reaction when Sonic is about to pick up the thing, was like, oh dear, that's not supposed to happen. But here is also from a storytelling perspective, this little sequence is very clever, because first we get, okay, there are 7 Chaos Emeralds. We know there are 7 of these things, this symbol here. Beep, beep. Sonic, our protagonist, has 1. Eggman, our villain, has 4. So far, so good. We understand that Eggman, we know that these things are important, clearly, because there's a diagram showing how many of them there are. And we know that Eggman wants them because he's clearly been collecting them. He's got way more than Sonic, who only has one. But then here's the important bit. There's two that are in possession of some other third mystery party. And from a storytelling perspective, this is really clever because it sets up what I imagine will be the plot of these animated shorts. The plot being the chase for the Chaos Emeralds, just like in the Sonic games. But what it tells us is that there's a third party involved that these two guys are going to be competing with. And again, not a single word is spoken. No text. There's no mysterious whereabouts of the emeralds have been stolen, blah, blah, blah. None of that. And very good expression. And I love this little, this just stone cold bunk. It goes down to 5 seconds. It's just kind of lovely. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say. I've talked for more than half an hour already. That surely must be enough. I'm going to tell you that there is a post-credits scene for this animated short. So you should go and watch it yourself and watch that post-credits scene because it might tell you a little bit about what the next animated short might be involving. And just watch it. Watch it. Give it lots of views on YouTube. Give it lots of comments. Give it lots of likes so that they will make more of them because I want to watch more of these and I want to talk about them forever. If talking about these things forever is something you would like to see me do, you can leave a like down below. You can leave a comment with any questions, anything you thought I missed, any of your thoughts on these animated shorts. What maybe I was wrong about something. Tell me if I was wrong about something down in the comments. Yeah, if you'd like to see me keep doing these breakdowns of every single episode, feel free to tell me that as well. I'll probably do it no matter what you guys say because I just love these things so much. My name has been TB Sky, and thank you very much for watching. Don't let anyone tell you what kind of Sonic you're allowed to enjoy, and I will see you in the next video.